Spider-Man Hostile Takeover. Chapter 10. She'd been there just before sundown, binoculars around her neck, dressed to be ready for anything. Black exercise leggings and a long-sleeve spandex top. The leather parkour gloves exposed her fingers, allowing for precision, but protected her palms from rough or jagged surfaces. While preparing herself, Maya had been thinking about her dreams. In them, she bore the handprint on her face. Perhaps it could become a trademark. Her trademark. Like her hated foe's spider symbol black on her chest. She dismissed the idea, yet she couldn't let go of it altogether. She had a bag of raw cashews, in case she needed a quick high-protein snack, and 2 bottles of water because dehydration made her sleepy. She couldn't afford to let her guard down. Not with this guy. The skyline loomed in the background as she trained her binoculars on the apartment window. The file Fisk had given her had been more than a little redacted. It contained Bigham's name, his nearest living relatives, where he'd gone to school, and little else. Even his address has been excised. Fortunately, Maya knew her way around the system. Fishing for more information was a good way to be found out, but locating an original version of a redacted document was fairly easy and likely to go unnoticed. The unexpurgated version hadn't told her much more, though. In the 2 hours she'd been camped out, she caught a couple of glimpses of him, but nothing of substance. Maybe what she was doing was absurd. Mr. Fisk had asked her to leave it alone, so she ought to do as he asked. He had his flaws, she knew that, but she trusted him to act in her best interests. He might try to conceal things from her, but he would never do anything that might harm her. Still, why did he need someone else who could move like Spider-Man? Did he not trust her to do what needed to be done? Did he think she would be unwilling to do what he required her to do? Sometimes Mr. Fisk hurt people. She visited Neto in the hospital just that afternoon, and it had served an unwelcome reminder of his temper. Despite his own tendencies, however, Mr. Fisk had never asked her to hurt anyone. Then why all the training? Did he think she wasn't ready? Life wasn't black and white. It was gray. And she had faith, absolute faith that if Mr. Fisk wanted someone to be hurt, they needed to be hurt. Because she knew that, she could be the right hand he needed her to be. All she had to do was show him how far she was willing to go to further his cause. Yes, his methods could be brutal, but this was a brutal world. Maya knew that more than anyone, and Mr. Fisk was trying to make the city better, more prosperous, more livable for everyone. Not just for the rich and the privileged. It was a mission worth pursuing. It wasn't simply good, it was just, and Maya was prepared to do what was needed for the cause. If hurting Spider-Man was part of the package, then that was just a bonus. Mr. Fisk often said that he thought Maya could do anything, that he never factored in her deafness when considering her potential. Yet here she was, on the sidelines, while some stranger was doing what ought to be her job. Not only doing it, but doing it in a way that somehow infuriated Mr. Fisk. Why would he allow that? She would find out what this man was up to, and she would show Mr. Fisk that there was nothing he couldn't trust her to do for him. She would show that whatever this Bingham person could do, she could do it better. An hour later, Bingham climbed out his window, wearing a Spider-Man suit. It was a good one, too. Thanks to her Oscorp military-grade binoculars, it was as if she was standing 2 feet in front of him. Like a second skin, the way the real web-slinger's suit looked. The colors were right, but there were a few imperfections. The web lines were a little too close together, though she doubted anyone without her skills would notice. Spider-Man himself probably couldn't tell the difference. So why hadn't Bingham worn the suit during the fight at the construction site? What was he up to now? She watched as he leapt off the fire escape, shot off a strand of some sort, and swung off into the night. Well, there's only one way to find out. She set the binoculars down, broke into a run, and leapt, adjacent to the roof. It wasn't easy keeping up with him. Bingham moved faster than she could. Though if she'd had access to web shooters, they'd have been more on even ground. She tried not to think about that. Mr. Fisk had access to web shooting technology, and he'd given it to Bingham, not to her. This isn't the time for that, she thought. Her focus had to be on following Bingham. Besides, it was better when her doubts shut down, and she can live in the burn of her muscles. This was going to take everything she had. New York did not provide a continuous supply of level roofs, which meant tailing a guy who could swing from building to building presented challenges. Maya leapt from the top of a building to a fire escape, scrambled up to another roof, dashed across the top, and hurled herself to grab into a drainage pipe, barely taking the time to hope it was properly affixed. She bounded over air conditioning units and crumbling brick walls. She clambered up a wall using windowsills and missing bricks as handholds. Fortunately, he didn't go far. There was a side street with an Italian wine bar that offered outdoor seating. Bingham clung to a wall, something else she couldn't do, and watch as Maya crouched in the shadows. Nothing much happened until a panhandler came by, asking the upscale wine bar patrons for a handout. Bingham leapt into action. He swung down and pointed his web shooters at the panhandler. With a thwap, the man was hurled across the street and webbed against the side of a building. Patrons screamed in horror and surprise. One indignant woman began to shout at Bingham to stop assaulting the poor man. He didn't pause, though. Without a word, he jumped upward, webbing his way into the night. Instantly, Maya was on her feet, intent on keeping up. She had to see what came next. Yet, that was it. Bingham went back to his apartment, entering the way he'd gone out, through the fire escape window. What's his game? What could he hope to accomplish? Bullying some homeless guy wasn't exactly to bring Spider-Man to his knees. A handful of people might decide that he wasn't the hero they thought he was. The story might make the newspapers, though that was less likely now that J. Jonah Jameson wasn't at the Bugle. He'd been one of the journalists willing to call out Spider-Man. So, if it hadn't been about dealing a blow to Spider-Man's reputation, what had been the point? Was it the panhandler himself? Unlikely. If those web shooters were like the real thing, they dissolved soon enough. Otherwise, the cops would cut him down. Whatever this was, a trial run, an equipment test, it couldn't be an endgame. And that meant the real plot was yet to come. Maya had two options, stealth or the direct approach. She already collected a lot of information. More than likely, she ought to go home, do a little more digging around. Perhaps even confront Mr. Fisk with what she learned. He might be impressed with her tenacity, her ability to keep up with a man who possessed superior abilities or technology, or both. Yes, the best thing to do would be to call it a night. Forget that. If she opted for stealth, she could try sneaking into Bingham's apartment. That didn't seem viable, though. A pizza delivery guy had arrived shortly after he'd returned, and that suggested a night in. Besides, while Maya didn't like to limit herself, and she believed that she could do anything a person with hearing could do, she wasn't unrealistic. No, breaking into a man's apartment while he was home would be foolish. That left a direct approach.